All right, cool. Should be good to go.
All right.
Mm.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks
So,
for having me.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So, welcome to the Praxis Behind the Obscure podcast. And today I have a friend who we've met through the Discord. We're both on actually the Duncan Trussell podcast Discord, which is definitely a podcast I've been listening to for like several years now. And I really like he has like a diversity of guests. And actually, in one way, I've never really mentioned this, he kind of inspired me to do podcasting because, his podcasts are kind of fun and unique, and he talks to such a range of people. And so, and it wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't just like on one topic, but he would jump around different topics. So, kind of inspired me, but we ended up connecting on there. And you talk a lot about meditation methods and Buddhism and other spiritual traditions. So I figured it'd be good to have you on today. So welcome to the podcast. And can you kind of introduce the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got interested in meditation and different traditions?
Yeah, so my actual name is Gabriel Durham, though I have this online moniker I use. It's a Nintozen or Nintozen, or however you want to pronounce it. It's a play on words that kind of means from survival to transcendence, or from kind of bearing the weight of a sword to jhana or some type of insight. So it's a play on words there. And yeah, I've been on Discords a lot and online, just kind of trying to help people kind of as pragmatically as I can, and also just revel in the juicy goodness that is these kinds of conversations. Because in the end, I mean, that's my favorite thing about it, is just getting to talk with people like you and everybody else. So to kind of get into the beginnings of your questions, really what started it was the very beginning. My parents are both incredibly spiritual people. Um, I don't want to say one more than the other, really, though my dad is more vocal about it, right? He's a performer, he's an artist. These are his paintings behind me,
Oh, very cool.
abstract expressionist kind of stuff. But he's also a playwright and a musician and a Native American activist. And my mom met him through all of that. And really, I'd say was my first like teacher. She's the one that would like take me to, I mean, hey, church, for lack of a better term, and also literally. So they started me off kind of already thinking about the world this way. I remember they first showed me meditation when I was very little. So there's actually a video of me, not a video, actually a picture of me in the Rocky Mountains sitting lotus on a boulder. So I know I at least knew how to sit that way and meditate since probably about like 6 or
Oh, wow.
so.
Wow.
Yeah, my earliest memory of meditation was coming home from Wyoming. We would do these long drives because dad was a musician. We'd do 18-hour drives, those kinds of things. And we were probably in Amarillo, Texas, because we were in Houston at the time and still are. And I was like, I'm just going to meditate on the way home, Dad. And he's like, okay, sure, 7-year-old, whatever. And I did. I remember quite vividly feeling completely uninterrupted and stabilize that entire 7 hours home and being like, oh, that's a thing I can do. And so from that point forward, I've been attracted to anything that gets me in that mindset or those kinds of things. Though I would honestly say I didn't really start applying it until I was a few years ago, because I had all these other things happen in life that took me away from it, which is one reason why I think I teach the way that I do about like, hey, we all get pulled out of it. We all get, physically injured, psychologically traumatized, all these kinds of things. Nobody gets this perfect Siddhartha kind of life anymore. So I value that I've been off the path even in that time. But since then, I've had martial arts have been a big source of my teachers. I started in the 80s and 90s karate boom, doing tournament fighting and the usual Shotokan, just like
Hmm.
fight there, sit there and kick and punch stuff in the white gi. But then I broke my hip when I was 13, completely through the whole head of the neck of my femur, and that kind of ended my high kicking days. And so from there, I found my teacher, Brian Tritico, who is a high master in what's called Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu, which is it's a very old it's a collection of very old Japanese arts that all came together by a teacher named Takamatsu Sensei, who then passed it to Hatsumi Sensei, who was Brian's teacher and also who I've trained with since then. And so I did the Bujinkan, and I still do, and I'm a certified instructor in for the rest of my life. I stayed there forever. It's deeply steeped in esoteric Buddhism and also Shinto rituals, and so it's about as esoteric as it gets. If you in Japan, if you really want to go down to, they've got the Kujikiri stuff that you see. They're tied to the Yamabushi as well, And that's where all the physical stuff coming through with, hip replacements. And I lost 1.5 feet of my colon, had to relearn how to walk 3 times. So the martial arts was
Wow.
deeply
Mm.
spiritual to me because of that. I was having so much physical trauma as a young person that it really gave me what I needed to survive, to transcend, hence the nickname Nintozen, all that stuff. And then in 2019 was when I realized that all of this physical trauma and striving and strife had kind of taken a toll on my mind, not to mention my body. And I kind of had to go into retreat in the true sense of that word. So I had a friend in Texas named Kim, and she was a nurse, but had been involved with this group called the Wooden Fish Foundation. And they have the only program I know of in the world that takes people to rural China to live and stay in monasteries for a month at a time, the entire month of July. They take a bunch of Western kids and adults, no age restriction. It's fully scholarship covered. You just have to pay for the ticket to Beijing, and the rest is covered.
Wow.
It's happening this year. So if any of you out there want to have this experience, it's going to be in Taiwan. But look up Wooden Fish program because it's really very, very special. So I went over there in 2019, and this is where, the kind of woo-woo comes in that's fun, which is that I was supposed to go to Inner Mongolia for the original monastery we were going to go to, but they kind of said, hey, we don't want all these Westerners. It's really tense in China right now. We're not going to take you. But we had all already bought the plane tickets and everything. And so ping pong around temples, trying to figure out where we're going to go. And we settled at, lo and behold, the Southern Shaolin Temple. So I wasn't supposed to be doing martial arts anymore, right? And there's some controversy there we can talk about later, maybe about the Southern Shaolin Temple in China. It's a really mysterious kind of story that's interesting. But
Funny. They're
for
probably
all
like,
intents
oh,
and purposes, I was at.
yeah, we're gonna bring you to a temple you probably don't know about it. It's called the Shaolin Temple. It's probably not famous in your, but you're like, holy
Right.
crap, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's so funny about this story is there's the northern one that's super duper famous, but the southern one is actually debated on if they've even found it. So we're going to this temple that they say is not even supposed to have been, archaeologically excavated yet. And so there's a stuff with the state there that, again, we can get into later after the intro's over. But so I stayed there for the whole month of July. Lo and behold, now I'm getting direct transmission of Qigong and Southern Shaolin Fist from these teachers there. And that was when I really got to connect to the kind of practice. It isn't just, okay, I'm going to meditate through a car ride, or I'm going to meditate and feel better with a headspace app, but the actual, like, I'm going to go down to the bedrock of reality kind of meditation. And right when I got home from that, quarantine broke out. And I was back in the monastery, so to speak. And Duncan Trussell dropped Midnight Gospel. And I was fresh from there, and I desperately wanted to integrate that. And so I was working remotely at the time, and in this wonderful house that I've been sharing with a group of people, kind of co-op style. And that's what really I was like, okay, I love my martial arts. I love the meditation, but this is really starting to crystallize into something I can talk with people about, I can work in. And then that eventually led to the Dzogchen. And I was watching your last guest, and it was fun to get to hear that from a different perspective, because Dzogchen is the newest kind of transmission I'm getting. It's completely out of the blue to me in my perspective, but it's been fantastically beneficial. And then last, I want to give a nod out to my friend Simon, he was one of my ninja buddies throughout Brian Tridico's classes, but we've stayed in touch since then. And he ended up going to China and staying on Wudang Mountain for a decade, which is the origin of like Wudang, Daosim, Kung Fu, all that. And he got indoctrinated as a priest of that. And because of just my relationship with him, he might not even like it that I say it, but I credit him as a teacher as well, because Taoism is kind of deeply core to me amongst all the other stuff. And my dad is a Taoist, like you mentioned, just when we first started talking. And I've actually been able to help my dad with his chemo and stuff because of the stuff Simon has told me about proper Qigong work, not the stuff that you can just get anywhere. So I do give Simon that credit.
Right. Maybe we can explore that a little bit, because I don't think I've really explored Taoism on this podcast. There does seem to be, I mean, that's with anything though, right? It's like there's, what would you say? Like markety, watered down, Taoism and fake Qigong and stuff like that. You'll see that everywhere, right? And then there's the authentic traditions that, it seems like you're talking about as well. And then, I mean, that's with any tradition, but maybe you can explain a little bit, because when I was in college, I studied, for a while, my major was philosophy. And like one of the first texts I read was the Tao Te Ching, and such a great, studied that, and that really got me interested. And what was the concept like Wu Wei, like being in the flow of the Tao or something like that, right? That was a very interesting concept.
Yeah,
But I
the
never really
non-doing.
got deep into Taoism, although I read a couple books on it. But maybe you can share a little bit about what it is and what a little bit about qigong and things along these lines.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be first to say there are people who are way more qualified than me to talk about this. But at the same time, I have been steeped in it in kind of a very Taoist way because it's, I didn't realize until I was in my 30s that my dad's music was influenced by Taoism. He never told me, he never said it, but then I'm reading these things and I'm like, that's exactly like the lyrics in dad's music that I've had stuck in my head since I literally existed. And so the Taoism has come to me not through text or not through any kind of thing. It's come Taoistically. And so that's the first thing I like to point out about this thing we call Taoism, that in order to really do it, you can't just read a bunch of books and be a philosopher about it. It's one of the most embodied things I've ever found. And not just your physical body, but where you are in space and time, where you are in a country, where you are aligned to all kinds of things. And so much of Taoism is actually figuring out what that even is. It's kind of like the best for like niche finding, because it's so fascinating because I say that you can't really get all of Taoism unless you're doing the Tai Chi and the reading and also the I Ching. So you know about those coins people throw?
Yeah, I know the I Ching. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got my from dad, a copy of the I Ching,
Oh,
and
nice.
I've got
Yeah,
in my journal of all the different readings I've done, tossing
nice.
coins and stuff.
Yeah, for those who
And
don't know, I
so,
Ching is it's a system of divination. So it's
mhm.
sort of like in Western esotericism, they use the tarot. It's I guess you can consider it kind of the similar a similar practice in that regard, right?
Oh, it's deeper than you'd think, because when Aleister Crowley and the Theosophical Society were devising a lot of the modern decks of tarot, Crowley actually said specifically, if the West is ever going to have any kind of divination that we can actually wrap our mathematical minds around, it's got to be based off of the I Ching.
Mm-hmm.
So the Theosophical Society was quite obsessed with the I Ching back in the 1900s. And a lot of these divination systems we see today since that society are deeply influenced by the I Ching. So I'd say it's more than just a passing similarity. I think are quite cross-pollinated.
Sure, sure, definitely.
Mhm.
I think Lon Milo Duquette or someone like that made a tarot deck that integrated the I Ching hexagrams and the actual tarot cards too. So
That's
that's pretty
very
cool as
cool. I'll have
well.
to show
Yeah,
my dad that.
yeah,
And it's so funny because going back to my parents being teachers, my mom was the tarot lady. So she would throw tarot stuff and dad would throw I Ching coins.
cross pollination. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, they're so connected because there's certain types of embodiment movements that you do in Tai Chi that will help you understand the text better, and then you'll have things happen with Qigong that you're going and you throw your coins, and then you end up getting this hexagram that has an interpretation that matches what was physiologically going on with your inner alchemy, so to speak. And when those line up, like you're getting coin tosses, complete law of chance in large numbers that line up with a deeply internal experience while you're doing these meditations. It's pretty wild. Talk about non-inebriated altered state of consciousness. It hits you. It's like this, whoa, and it's deeply enriching. So the first Taoist book I ever read was actually the last book Alan Watts ever wrote. He's known so much as a Zen guy, but he got really interested in Taoism towards the end, and he wrote a book called Tao the Watercourse Way, that is a really good, approachable book on Taoism. That it has a chapter on Wu Wei. It's a lot less poetic than a lot of Taoist texts, so it's very digestible to a Western mind. And then he had a friend who finished it for him, because he couldn't finish it. Watts died before the book was done, and this Taoist monk kind of does the second draft and adds footnotes, and it says a lot about Alan's life that is really fascinating that I don't hear very often. Like he actually talks about the yang of the alcohol and this like deep part of the yang persona that Alan could never really let go, which is why he couldn't quite get the balance of the Tao towards the end of his life. It's like, whoa, dude, you're talking about the dude's dead. You're going to say this stuff, but it's very raw and very real, and it's a perspective of Watts we don't often get, especially in today's world where it's all YouTube videos of him talking to hip hop beats and stuff.
Right, that's true. That's true. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
So you really got into it. I mean, obviously, your dad was very heavily influenced by Taoism or practitioner of Taoism, and then you went to China, and then you, through the martial arts, they also taught side by side qigong. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, cool. So can you share a little bit about qigong? Like, what's the difference between qigong and tai chi? Tai chi is a martial art. Qigong is more of energy flow practice, right?
They're kind of related that way. So yeah, Taiji has very specific forms that you do that is, they're building balance and flow and kind of training your subconscious in other ways. But Qigong is kind of more internal.
Mhm.
But also, if you don't know it, you'd think it was just a bunch of old people exercises in the park. Because
Right.
with Tai Chi you have this holding the ball and you're moving in a certain way, but sometimes Qigong you're literally just kind of shaking your shoulders so all your fat jiggles just right. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
deal with this connective tissue stuff, or you're slapping the body in a certain place to cause these types of nerve reactions, or sometimes yes, in the higher levels you're doing these very deep breath work, moving breath into different parts of the body, doing these types of jing and qi and those kinds of work. And it gets very, very, can get far out, but also be very, very down to earth. That's the qigong I learned in the temple. Fascinatingly enough, was actually Buddhist qigong. So there's this weird thing that is Chan Buddhism in China that became Zen Buddhism in Japan that has very long relationship with Zen. To China, India is a Western country, so Buddhism to them is a Western religion. So that's a good thing to break down the whole East-West thing. And right, it's not East-West; it's just religion.
Right.
And so there's this thing that's been going on that actually will push back the historical birth date of the Buddha, because they're constantly saying, well, the Buddha just got watered down Taoism, and then they're like, no, the Buddha is the one who inspired all these Taoist guys. And so the fight with the text will push the historical date of each historical successor further and further back by sometimes even millennia.
Mm.
So that conversation has been going on for so long that you end up with kind of what I call this gradient of Indian Buddhism, and then you've got Taoism, and then across the Himalayas and also the Taklamakan Desert and those kinds of things, they start to really have a long, long conversation.
There's a
And
lot of
so,
cross-pollination. That's what people don't understand. So a lot of the Mahayana sutras too, some of them
mhm.
it's very clear that they're written in Sanskrit, that they originate in India. It's very clear that some of them originated in China. The original manuscripts are in Chinese. But then there's other ones where it's like it started in Chinese and they flipped it to Sanskrit, which people never even imagined, right? So
Yes, exactly.
and then there's
I
other
think there was
ones
a
where it's
big
like,
fire or something.
yeah, or like half of it was written in Chinese, the other half in Sanskrit. So there's so much back and forth, going on there.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's why the state in China right now is so interesting, because they actually have some of the oldest dated Buddhist manuscripts, because there was all these fires and loss from war in India where we lost a lot of information of Buddhism, that then the oldest surviving texts were these Chinese texts that they then had to re-Sanskritize, which is why Tibet is such a big deal, because what's the place where all that's coming through and back and forth is this Tibet, Nepal kind of region.
Mhm.
I think that's one reason I'm in Dzogchen right now, is I'm fascinated by how much I see India and China in it.
Mm.
In this kind of, I can see the conversation going on longest there between the two,
Sure.
particularly in Dzogchen, Tibetan Buddhism. So anyway, but what I mean to say, bringing it back to the Qigong, is I learned a Buddhist Qigong, but it's Buddhist from a Chan Buddhist, which means already got the Taoist in it perspective.
Mm.
And the main difference I can tell is that the Buddhist is very linear and the Taoist is very is circular and twisting. So there's very much this kind of, so for example, there's one that we did over here. You can kind of see my hands where it's just going straight up and down, where you're kind of working with your lungs and moving breath in this way. But the Taoist version, you're actually spinning the arms like pinwheels.
Mm.
But it's technically the same, what's called the 8 brocades of the Baduan Jing. And so the two are, I've learned both versions. I've learned the Wudang version of the 8, and I've learned the Southern Shaolin version of the 8. And they're so different, but they're just so Taoist. I can catch the flavor of the flowy, spirally, twisty that is the Taoist thing, wringing you out like a rag, and then the Buddhist, which is very much straight back, straight arms, statuesque kind of thing, and just how the flavors have come through.
Yeah, these systems are quite interesting. The Taoist system reminds me of the Tibetan yoga, which is sometimes called yantra yoga, or Tsalung Trulkor, I guess, which is basically it's
Yeah.
a lot more movement based, right? You're working with the nadis, the channels, the winds, the drops, right? And so
Yes.
more rather than most people imagine yoga, like hatha yoga is more like holding poses, right? Whereas in the Tibetan yoga, it's exactly like you're saying, you're working with the same, the same energy systems. However, although the maps can be different, however, you are doing more movement, right? There's 32 connected movements, and like you said, you might be, slapping areas, or going in different directions, breathing through different nostrils, right? So it's a little bit more I don't know what you'd say, physically dynamic, perhaps, right? In expression,
Mm.
rather than holding and still, right? And linear.
So
So yeah.
yeah, and this is exciting for me because one of my things is my master's degree is actually human variation in anthropology. So I study human biological variation to adaptation to cold, stress, high altitude, all those kinds of things, and I think the high altitude has something to do with that. And it's a complete theory. I have not been able to like research this terribly deeply, but like I was talking with Simon, and one thing that he mentioned is that you've got these Tibetan yogas where sometimes they'll be sitting in a lotus position, they'll take a big old huff of breath and then do a bunch of quick motions while they're in this like single thing, and then they'll bring it back down to stillness. And so I think about that with the things that I've learned from human beings and cultures that live in high altitudes, and they'll do that for straight up high altitude conditioning of the lungs, and also just it affects the way the blood works differently because of the way that your high altitude lungs function. And so to me, that is a piece of it that I would love. Like if I actually made it in academia and had a bunch of grant money, I'd go into that, like the effects of high altitude on yogas, and how it changes how the breath work is done. Because I think that's deeply a piece of it. People always forget the land, and to that people will often ask me, what's all this ecology stuff with all this meditation, martial arts you're teaching? And the land is you can't take it out. And I think one of the sicknesses of humanity right now is we're learning all this stuff and it's decoupled from the land. And even in the Shaolin styles, the northern Shaolin style, the reason is the way it is because they're on these craggy, rocky things. You can afford to jump around and leap and kick people. But southern China was muddy. It was urban. So urban means a lot of slop back then. And so you can't do these high kicks, flying things that the northern Shaolin monks do. So if you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, you're an earthbender. Deep, low stances, hitting with this kind of mantis that's called Huangar in a lot of other places, And so you're rooted fighting in the slop. You can't kick up high. You're going to break those legs, or you're going to end up doing something else. So the land is like this silent character throughout so much of tradition and stuff that I think is deeply ignored and shouldn't be. It's kind of the root of it all.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. I mean, there's a reason why. I think there's definitely a reason why a lot of these practices come out of places like the Kashmir Valley and the Himalayas. There's so much cross pollination going on, and as you said, those regions sort of bred a specific, what would you say? There's specific energy there, but then there's also these people adapting to their physical environment, right? And so much cross pollination when you look at the region. You have Afghanistan, Pakistan, which is where kind of like Dzogchen claims to come from, that sort of region where you have like Padmasambhava, right? Odayana, which they say is probably somewhere around Afghanistan, Pakistan, right? And then you got, like you said, you got the Taoists, the Qigong, the Taoists here, you got the Hatha Yoga guys here, the Buddhists here, and it's just this like central region where just so much cross pollination and debate and exchange of texts and practices. So yeah, definitely agree with you. Yeah, for sure. So you were in China. We kind of like left off. You were in China. You got into you're in the Southern Shaolin temple training kung fu, Tai Chi, Qigong, right?
Mm-hmm. Though I was also part of for the Wooden Fish program, so that was only in my mornings. I had to get up, actually stay up early and stay up late because the rest of the people were there for Wooden Fish. We were supposed to just be there meditating, doing the Chan monastic, very much inspired by Fuguanshan in Taiwan, like that style of living. And the monks were just so excited to have people there. They were like, we're going to teach some of them Kung Fu. And they're like, well, it can't interrupt their monastic duties. And they were like, well, we're going to have an audition. And we're going to have a bunch of people who, if they look like they're good enough, we got to give this transmission. There's just never Westerners here. And so because I had done martial arts so long, they picked me out of the crowd and said, hey, you've done martial arts before. We're going to give you this thing. So I had to get up extra early and stay up extra late to get this transmission because I couldn't miss out on my otherwise 8 hours of meditation and also vespers and cleaning the places. Though because of that, I have this memory that I have to share because it's one of those peak experience moments where I got pulled out from vespers. I'm under my noble silence, so I can't talk at all, and I'm supposed to be learning this kung fu, and I can't even make eye contact. I'm in full vows of silence, like no eye contact, no writing, no nothing. And I get pulled over into the temple, and everybody's gone, all the monks are asleep, but it's a full moon night. And the full moon is over the Shaolin temple, and there's cats prowling the temple because they're out looking for stuff, and they're ringing the goodnight bells, the bong bong, and we're out there drilling kung fu completely in silence with this full moon over the temple. And it was too cool. So I have to credit my Wooden Fish teachers too, is the main cool stories aside, because Venerable Ifa is my main Chan Buddhist instructor. She gave us the main instructions. You also have Huifeng, who she likes to call Kiwi because he's otherwise a New Zealander guy. He was our disciplinarian. A guy named Peter was the guy who really taught me Buddhist history for the first time, because I'm such a wild man. Like, I only practice. I'm not a historian. So I'll go and do the practices. I hadn't even heard the full life story of the Buddha until I was probably 28 years old, and I'd been meditating for years. So I want to do the thing, you know. But so yeah, just to get that rounded out, I had a lot of teachers in China, not just the Shaolin guys.
Mhm. Okay, cool. So I'm curious. Then the next part of that story, obviously, you come back to America.
Hmm.
How's the story kind of developed from there? Like, you probably kept up these practices, and then what kind of, because it seems like you explored other traditions as well. How does that story develop?
Well, so I stuck with Wooden Fish for a while, and I'm still with them. I'm actually, anytime Aoife calls, I will gladly help with whatever initiative she has. Kim is still involved. I love my Wooden Fish family, so I worked with that for a while. During COVID, I would stay involved with them doing some e-sangha stuff, like coordinating meetings. We had a Buddhism and sustainability conference where I talked about the Eightfold Path as a sustainability framework, because that was my main job at the time, was a sustainability manager. And then I kind of had a bit of a dark night of the soul for a while, because I desperately wanted to do only that, to create community, to share these kinds of experiences with people, this kind of wellness, frankly, with people. I had never been so well in my life, and I wanted to be around those kinds of well people. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to start applying for a PhD program.
Mm.
And there's this program here in Houston called the GEM program, which stands for Gnosticism, Esotericism, and Mysticism. I mean, like,
Oh,
oh my God,
wow, wow.
right? Like, oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Where's that?
Eh,
Where do you study at?
well, no, so that's the sad part. I didn't get in.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a, yeah, it's Rice University. But what happened is, I throughout that period, I was talking with a couple of professors at Rice. Anne Klein was the first connection I made there, and she is my Dzogchen Lama, like 100%. To jump to the end of the story, but I was also working with a guy named Jeff Kripal, who is he's the most far out guy you'll ever experience. I mean, the guy gets NASA money to work on poltergeist stuff. Like, come on, how? You know, he's really far out. So for your listeners that are into the really far out stuff, he literally is the administrator of something called the Archives of the Impossible, which is the largest collection of impossibly documented phenomenon in the world, including everything from Project Stargate that the CIA funded, the Men Who Stare at Goat stuff. He's got all that. So, I mean, it's really substantially invested in Rice to have that stuff there, hence the Gnosticism, esotericism, mysticism.
So it sounds like
So I
a
was working
serious
with them
program, serious.
it's amazing.
Awesome. Wow.
Yes. So I was trying to get into that, and I had the bad luck of, it was the first time they were accepting graduate students in 3 years because of COVID. So the pool was gigantic. And come to find out, Anne's probably getting close to retiring and those kinds of things. And so I got on the waiting list, but I ended up not getting the final call. They were both very sweet about it. But since then, I've stuck with Dawn Mountain, which is Anne's Lama Riggs and Drolma, her main Dawn Mountain temple. And the weird thing is ever since I've been with them, their actual temple has not existed. They've either had to sell it or go under construction. And so every single thing I've done with them has been through a computer screen, yet it's been fantastically rich. I've gotten Yeshe Tsogyal transmission, Green Tara transmissions, all with Anne and her husband Harvey, who is also an endowed Lama. And he's a psychoanalyst, like a PhD psychoanalyst. So like the combo of her pure Dzogchen awareness and perspective, and his equally pure jokes and perspective, but informed by Western, like really sharp philosophy, makes their combo quite something, especially for learning how to talk about mind.
Hmm. Okay. How did you ended up finding about her name is Anne Klein, right? You found her through the GEM program, sorry.
And
Uh,
through Simon, because Simon is a graduate of that program.
wow.
So
Okay.
again, Simon being a big teacher of mine, I've been following him around for a while.
Okay. Cool. So then you ended up joining this. It's called Mountain Dawn. Is that right?
Dawn Mountain.
Dawn Mountain. Sorry, flipped it, reverse. Yeah. Dawn
Yeah.
Mountain and finding a teacher. And this is in I think it's a Nyingma tradition as well, right?
It is in Nyingma.
Okay, cool. So how is that like? So you came from almost like a Zen. Well, Chan and Zen are basically the same thing. It's the
Yeah.
original kind of. But and then into this, did you notice a lot of similarities? Were there any differences? Because as you know, in Vajrayana, they use a lot of, what would you say, like deity yoga. There's so many like, what would you say, technologies employed that you don't really see in like some traditional Buddhist atmospheres or settings, right?
Yeah, no, it's been wild. But I honestly say it's interesting. I see, and somebody might get mad at me for saying this, but I see Zen or Chan at the beginning of Dzogchen and at the end of Dzogchen. So, for example, the levels of stillness I was able to achieve through Zen and Chan are, in my opinion, why I can even approach Dzogchen. The amount of focus it requires, the amount of insight, prajna kind of stuff that it requires, I think my ego could not grok it. It would just think it was church or something again. You know what I mean? Like there's all these kinds of things because it is very Catholic, you know? I think there's a lot of similarities between Catholicism and Tibetan Buddhism and then Protestantism and Zen Buddhism. I have this thing I say that you have this bell that went off in the Himalayas and it ended up on two archipelagos, one England, one Japan, and they both mercantilized the world with their Protestant Zen. And then when it met in the middle again, the circuit went off that was the atom bomb. You know, like it was this circuit of the greater thinking machine of the Northern Hemisphere. That anyway, but that's a tangent. So what I mean to say is, but at the same time, Dzogchen, you know, the lineage head that even Lama An got her transmission from is Adzam Pelo Rinpoche. And Adzam Pelo Rinpoche, one of the things that he says is a single instant of effortless meditation is more valuable than an an entire eon of effortful meditation, which is a very Zen thing to say, right? Like there's give up on the enlightenment. There's nothing to do here. And so I've noticed in the highest levels of Dzogchen, there's nothing to do here. They say you're already enlightened. You know, you're already you're seeing the world as enlightened beings. You're seeing the room as a pure land. You're seeing yourself as a Buddha while you're doing all these sadhanas. And so, like, if you take all the beautiful poetry and flowery language and light and all that kind of stuff, the actual experience is still what Zen is transmitting of that you're there. You know, this kind of koan state. But it's full of poetry and metaphor. And as a being raised by a musician and a painter and an artist, it really clicks with me. And so it's also made my teaching better because I hate to say it, but I've noticed Zen has a really good connection to PTSD because if you have,
I've never heard that. Okay, yeah, I'd be interested to hear that.
yeah, so I have as I mentioned before with the hip breaks and I lost 1.5 feet of my colon and relearning how to walk. I noticed when I was at my deepest level in the monastery in complete, you know, silence, and I'd been doing it for 3 weeks already at that point. I realized there was a lot of states of mind I was reaching that I had reached while I had a continual stomach pump for a week. When I had the foot after my colon taken out, I had this pump that was down my nose, pumping my stomach 24/7. And it was, you know, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, nothing. Everything was feeding me through tubes. And I remember being like, oh yeah, this is that place where I went to like let go and transcend and the quiet. I call it kind of the quiet place. And I remember I told that to Venerable Aoife, and she just looked at me and she says, "What kind of job do you have?" And I was like, but what I mean to say is that like then if I work with other people who have PTSD and chronic pain, which I have done with meditation before, I realize if you acknowledge the fact that their trauma has initiated them, it connects with them in a very powerful way that if you take people who haven't had that level of trauma and you try to force them to be completely still and quiet, they get traumatized by it. They get freaked out. They're like, you're trying to keep me so still and quiet. But so I've noticed that when I first started trying to teach, when I first started to go out there, I made a lot of people really uncomfortable. And it almost came off as militant because I was so like, you guys don't understand, just sit and be still.
Yeah, right.
And somehow that was aggressive though, especially in a world where everything's headspace and guidance and all that stuff.
Right.
And so then I come to Tibetan Buddhism, and all of a sudden you have these wonderfully rich things about connect to the ground from which the two purposes simultaneously occur. You know, it's like, oh, that's rich. That's the nectar they talk about. You know what I mean? They love nectar in Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah, they do a lot of nectar. Yeah, nectar metaphor.
And speaking of similarities, I have a thing that I wonder if Jing is nectar, and I'm wondering the cross pollination there of Taoist language of Jing and then Tibetan
words
of
nectar. What does Jing mean? I'm not familiar with that.
So Jing is one of the primal essences. It's also called the watery substance. The internet loves to point out that Jing retention is no nut November because a lot of people who I got you when you were drinking.
Oh, so that's the origin of no fap.
Exactly. So there's a lot of, especially in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the Taoism got translated was about sex because they do have a lot of really good science about sex in Taoism, because they're not so hung up. And so that came through to a lot of like, it's really good to teach to people to get them to like not have early ejaculation. So that got really embedded in American culture. So like Jing retention and holding the Jing in America means holding your jizz, holding your cum. But in in true Taoism, that's what's called post-celestial Jing. So that's like after the universe has been born and divided and created all these kinds of things. Like that's what comes after. But then you've got pre-celestial Jing, which is the watery nature of the stuff that creates the cosmos. And then mind is the fiery nature of stuff that creates the cosmos. And so they always talk about working with Jing in Taoist meditations. And I've noticed that theirs comes from the bottom up sometimes, and then Tibetan is top down, because you've got this nectar like in Vajrasattva that pours out the top of your head and like goes around your face, all that kind of stuff. But I've noticed that the way they talk about nectar is very similar to the way that the Taoists might talk about Jing. Of course, actual people in these traditions might get real mad at me, but I'm a comparativist. I'm a wild ninja. I'm just finding out what works.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I mean, it is important to find out what works for you and what you connect with. Like I think I mentioned in the previous podcast, it said that the Buddha taught 84,000 dharmas for the 84,000 predispositions and karmic aptitudes of people, right? So it is important to find that. There are so many similarities too. The more you study these different traditions and practices and get to the heart essence of things, there are a lot of similarities too, but also there are a lot of differences too, honestly too, right? So there's one way where it's like you can become very dogmatic, like this is the only way, like you know what I mean, like a I don't know, my vision of like what is that called, what do they call the Christians that are always talking about the second coming, the words
Are those Seventh Day Adventists?
no, I'm looking for
The rapture people?
yeah, like the rapture people. Yeah, there's another word I was
Yeah.
looking for, but basically, yeah, the rapture people who are always like on their, hey, brick and brimstone and things like that, right? So you can become very dogmatic in one system or one philosophy or one scripture or something like that, right? And then on the other hand, though, you can also become like so. What would you say? The opposite of that would be like, oh, everything's just the same. There are no differences. I think there's personally, because I've studied a lot of these traditions and practices, there are so many similarities, but there are also some crucial differences, right? Because
Exactly.
yeah, so it's like, for example, so it's almost like intellectually dishonest to say, for example, Christianity and Islam are the same, right? So many similarities. They are the Abrahamic, would you say, tradition. However, there are key differences, right? Like
Key
there are in
differences, yes.
doctrinally or in practice and stuff like that. So I would also be interested to explore, what do you see different, like key differences? We talked a little bit about Zen, Chan. We talked a little bit. Don't want to piss off the Chinese listeners, but it's funny because I live in Korea. That's another interesting side note. I live in Korea. It's called Sun Buddhism, Sun, right? And
Yeah.
China, Chan. So Chan came down to Korea, Sun, and then it came from Korea to Japan called Zen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyhow, what do you see the key differences in maybe practices or approach or things along those lines between perhaps Taoism, Zen, Vajrayana, and other traditions and practices that you've been a part of?
Yeah, I think that's why, especially in a lot of Eastern traditions, you'll see motivation is a key starting point in a lot of what they're doing. And I think that's where they're kind of saying, what flavor are you after here? Because, like, for example, Taoism is fantastic for, I think, taking care of the physical body and in ways that I've never really quite experienced, and helping you understand the relationship between like your amygdala and so many other parts of your body. Like, I think if I'm going to help somebody deal with panic attacks, for example, like, man, Taoism is a very interesting system for that. Then, with the Dzogchen and Vajrayana, I think it's really, really special for the mind. I think they have a map of mind and I don't just mean brain mind. I mean mind in the Tibetan sense, like that the mind experience they have mapped so beautifully.
Consciousness and awareness and
Root awareness, like I love the concept of the Dharmakaya. Those kinds of things are so interesting with what Tibetan Buddhism has. While Zen, I think, is the root of it all. But again, I'm speaking from my perspective because that's where I came from. That it kind of grounds it all of when you get the psychedelicness of Vajrayana and it gets a bit too crazy, the Zen can kind of like reset you back into focus and discipline and those kinds of things. They're again, like you're saying, they're also different. And like I like to point out with the Western side that we call them all God except for Allah, but it's all still technically talking about the same entity, so to speak.
All
But
God
that's the one
except
we
for
don't
what?
translate.
Say that again.
Huh?
All God. You cut out a little bit. All God except for something.
So like Christianity, we say it's God. Judaism, we say it's God. But then all of a sudden we get to Islam, we say Allah, even though it's
Oh, Allah.
technically
Yeah.
part of the same tradition. It's the same entity, all these kinds of things. But that's the one we don't translate. We don't translate that one, but we
Yeah.
translate the rest automatically. So
Right.
that's just a
Right.
funny thing. So like to your point, but that matters quite a bit, and how cultures shape the perception of a thing and the roundness of a thing. So I've noticed with Taoism, most of all, you got to have this body component. You've got to have the Tai Chi, you've got to have the Qigong, and it's deeply a part of it. And I think that's why you see so many martial arts that come around things that Taoism influences. In Japan in particular, so many of the martial arts they rode on the tails of Buddhism, and I think I would love to study that one of these days. How to get that reconciled, because it always starts as medicine, and even like for example, a lot of the Chinese medicine charts become these pressure point charts in Japan, and it's like this thing that used to be this like deeply Buddhist map of like mind body, all of a sudden is like, oh, now it's this ninja cool pressure point, paralyze you with a couple hits kind of thing. It's interesting to see how that happens in history, and it wasn't just Japan. We've seen Kung Fu Panda, they've got the stuff as well. Kill
Yeah.
Bill, that's all got that stuff too. So yeah, I think Taoism is body, Zen is discipline, and then Vajrayana is like this mind experience wrangling thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people don't associate Buddhism per se with martial arts, but being here in Asia, so for example, I did a temple stay up here in the mountains. This is kind of a cool story. I did a temple stay at a Sun Zen Chang. I keep using these terms interchangeably, but at basically a Korean Zen temple, I guess you'd call it. It's way up in the mountains up here, and it's where actually Bruce Lee was going to film his next movie. So he had actually
Oh,
Bruce Lee is considered almost the first MMA fighter because he was the first guy, like back in the day, this is way before the UFC, obviously, and things like that. He's the first guy who was training in judo, in kung fu, Wing Chun. Then he learned taekwondo from Korean masters. So he'd come to Korea, he would come to Japan, right, as you see in the movies and
mm-hmm.
stuff. And there's a really, really beautiful temple up here. It's about 1,500 years old, and he really loved it. That was going to be the scene of the next movie. And I ended up doing a temple stay there and finding out about that. But one thing that was really cool about that was that temple has a history about the Chinese coming in and invading Korea, and they had to sort of they were monks, but then also they had to take on the self defense aspect, right? And so they ended up like training
Classic.
martial arts, and then they had not only did they have martial arts, they also had like a self defense force, and so they ended up being one of the main forces that stopped like Chinese invaders, right? So that's interesting because people don't think about and they're very proud of that. Like we helped, like this Buddhist community helped Korea remain independent, right? And so,
Oh, the Southern Shaolin Temple has the exact same story, but it's the Japanese instead of the Chinese. Like
right,
it's
exactly.
repeated. It's like an
Yeah.
origin story. It's always the monks that we were just good old monks, and then the pirates came. It's always some kind of some pirate or invading force, and then we had this great Buddha relic, and we had to make sure they didn't steal the Buddha relic, and that's why we picked this up. And that goes back to Bodhidharma, because that's the cool thing about this is the Zen, the Chun, the Chan, that all goes back to Bodhidharma.
Mhm.
And he's one of those figures that, in my opinion, if you go all the way back, I would actually trace way back to as a Shivic entity or a Shiva guy,
Mhm.
because if you think about Shiva, he's the dancing destroyer, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that there is a Shivic lightning bolt that kind of goes through that edge of the world that kind of knits all the martial arts together. I think that Shiva is the original patron saint of this thing we call martial arts that isn't, warfare or tactics or all the other kinds of things that we have words for. This thing we call martial arts is this very strange umbrella that we've created over time. And I think that it's what connects them versus brawling, versus match fighting, versus all this kind of stuff. What makes this thing that is the spiritual martial arts is that whatever that trident of Shiva that goes through it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of historians too seem to trace like martial arts origins back to something along the lines of Shaivism and hatha yoga and things along these lines.
Hmm.
So that's very interesting.
Oh yeah. And
Um,
that's another, it's so funny. I found out that that book, I Am That, it's behind me, is one of my favorite books of all time. And he's actually a Shivik guy.
mm,
And he was one, and I connected to him immediately. I just reading his was, to me, it was like, oh man, this is the best of the best. This is the least fluff. This is exactly what's happening kind of book. So
yeah.
I Am That is pivotal for me.
Yeah, it is hard to. That's a good thing to mention. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of teachers that are all substance. And that takes time to screen out too. That's with anything in life, of course. I always say that, right? It's like you can say you want to learn business. There's a lot of people who will sell you, you know, how to get rich.
Hmm.
Just send me $1,000, and it's like one tip, and there's a bunch of fluff, right? Or even in
Yep.
Buddhism, right? There's a lot of, watered down. Like one thing that's kind of disheartening. It's like Buddhism to be a better capitalist, right? It's like
Yep.
we're going to teach you mindfulness so that you can work 14 hours and slave away for our corporation without the stress. You know what I mean? So sort of like,
And well, so now to get back to the Taoism,
yeah.
that's where Taoism always organically pops up in China, is against that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so for example, do you know about the Tanping movement in China right now, the lay flat movement?
No, what is that?
So essentially, there's this saying in China, 666, right? 6 days a week, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's how they work. It's all 12-hour days, 6 days a week. And it's this idea that you got to do that to get a car, to support China, to get a house, to support China, to have children to support China. And it's their whole, like, this is how you are a good Chinese citizen. And there is a few people who realized, hey, if I just don't want all that, I can live in hostels and work out for the rest of my life and read poetry and actually be a human being. And so they call it lay flat. And the people who are the founders of that movement have all been systematically arrested in China.
Well, not
And
surprised.
right, exactly. But what is that but Taoism, right? Saying, so one of my favorite stories in Taoism is, have you heard about the crooked tree story in Taoism?
Maybe, but maybe you can refresh me.
So there's this bunch of gorgeous, beautiful trees that all these people are giving teachings under and all this stuff. And then the loggers come along and they're like, oh man, these trees are so perfect. They can make so many houses. And so they're cutting down these trees and all the yogis have to go up and do their thing and all the animals have to go, all these kinds of things. And they get all these wonderfully useful trees down to make useful things for society, for useful stuff. And they leave this one completely gnarled old pine tree that not a single straight 2 inches on it at all, and it's the only tree left standing. And so the Taoist master takes his students to that tree and he says, become like this tree, so useful that you're free.
Okay. Okay. I like that. I like that. That's a good one. That's a good one.
I love that one. I've
Yeah, that's
always
very
loved
good.
that one.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about like these different teachers you study with. I always like asking people, can you share some very maybe like a profound moment, some interesting moments, a funny moment with some of these teachers that you got the chance to spend time with? And also I'm very
Yeah.
curious, like because I got to study with a lot of different teachers too, and I noticed, some people like to just have one teacher and that's all they focus on, but for me personally, I don't want to speak for anyone else. It is very nice to have different teachers of different traditions or who have different, or maybe the same tradition, but who have different perspectives and different personal characteristics, because there's a lot we can learn from other people's approach, their characteristics, things along these lines,
Hmm.
right? So maybe you can share a little bit about that too, like traits that you have adopted from teachers too.
Oh yeah, that I was hoping we could get to that one because I think there's a bigger point there. But to get with the fun stuff first,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad this is coming up because I haven't gotten to talk about my actual grandmaster yet, Soke Masaki Hatsumi.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as where I hold the most legitimate credentials is through the Bujinkan. So Brian, I mentioned him before. He was my teacher in the U.S., but he was the one who sponsored me to go to Japan the first 2 times to go through the process to become a certified instructor of this art.
When you
And
say sponsored, do you mean like financially, or do you mean you need somebody to like vouch for you to?
you need somebody to vouch for you,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
at least for the test that I took. You can go to Japan on your own, though you'll probably just be kind of a fly on the wall to actually get like instructions and also selected for certain ranks past a certain point. You have to have a sponsor of a higher rank or these kinds of things.
Okay.
It's a yeah. So essentially, Masaki Hatsumi, he's in my opinion one of the most truly alive of these like doing something else kind of human beings. Hatsumi Sensei, the first time I met him was in 2005, and I was probably 17 at the time, and maybe no 16, and I had spent all this money to get there. I had been training in the art for years to see this man, And he walks in the room and everything goes blank as if he's a stranger. And he looks at me and he's just like, "Oh, hello, nice to meet you." I shake his hand, "Yeah, nice to meet you too." And you're like, it's like, and then he's gone around the corner. And when he leaves the room, all of a sudden, boom, that was Hatsumi Sensei. But what's he the grandmaster of? Ninjutsu. He's a ninja. But I was overwhelmed so quick that when I was with him, all the fanboy stuff, all the enthusiasm, it was like he was a stranger. Something about what he was able to do with how his whole energetic imprint was so amazing. And then when I actually came to train with him, because that was as he was walking into the place, but then he comes back out after putting his belts on and stuff, and boom, there's Hatsumi Sensei. Like, oh my gosh. And we have a lot of things that sound woo-woo about him, but they've all been caught on camera where like he's hit with a side hand, the side of a spear, and the spearhead is broken in two. Like, and they've taken it to scientific people and been like, we don't know how this happened. I've seen him, have people literally almost stuck to him while he's moving around, and they're just literally stuck to him as if it's electricity. And this isn't Mick Dojo stuff, because these are the thing about the Bujinkan that's so special is there are people who are Israeli special ops training in it. There are ex-Green Berets training in it. There are so many legitimate
who have real world combat experience and wartime experience. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and they can't touch Hatsumi Sensei.
That's interesting.
And so my favorite thing about getting to meet my second trip was when I took my certification to teach, and that's a really cool test if we have time to talk about that, because it's a controlled esoteric event. It's really cool.
So it's a certification to teach ninjutsu, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, cool, awesome. Okay.
Specifically these 9 schools that are in the Bujinkan. And so I finally am training with my teacher. I've just gotten my certification to teach. We're having our cool times training on the floor, punching at each other. And Hatsumi Sensei is going around, and he points at us training. And because my teacher's the senior, he squares up because he's ready to do the thing. And Hatsumi Sensei says, "No, not you." And then he points at me. And I was like, "What?" And he's just this goofy, laughy old man. At this point, he had purple hair, because there's this thing in Japan where you can dye your hair purple after a certain age. So he had this purple hair.
Yeah, that's one thing about Japan is, it's our neighbor here, right? It's an hour away from me. And what's funny about the big difference of going to Japan from Korea is here, most company workers, they have to have like more of a professional look, whereas in Japan, you'll see like salarymen with their, business uniform, but then with like wild, like Dragon Ball Z haircuts. And
Apparently that has something to do with show business, that if you had at least been on television once, you're allowed to do that forever after that point. And Hatsumi Sensei was on a TV show. And so anyway, but so he has his hair all purple and he's pointing at me. He's like, "Yes, punch, in broken English." And I'm like, "All right, here we go. I'm going to get to train with the Grandmaster of the Ninjas. Like, here we go." I throw a punch and then he was gone. It was the funniest thing. It's like, as soon as I threw the punch, not only could I not physically see him, but again, I had this overwhelming sensation that I was completely alone in a room, and I had hundreds of people around me. I had this like almost brain fart of like, what am I even doing? I even forgot that I was punching. It was just like, whoop. And then all of a sudden, bang, I hit the ground. And he's looking over me and he's just, understand? And I was like, what? And then I realized, because now he's giving me the nudge, that he's got 2 fingers right up in my armpit, about right there. And as I stand up, it was like he was a spear stuck in my arm, because it wasn't that he was pushing me up. It wasn't that he was dropping the connection. It's like, as I stood, he was completely and utterly connected to me, like I was a piece of his own body. And then it started to come together, because then to me, with my other Buddhist stuff, I realized that was true Tantra. Because everything in martial arts is body versus a body, every martial art, until I met Hatsumi Sensei. And what Hatsumi Sensei does is he takes the space and he blurs it to where there's no such thing as violence if there is no other.
Well, that's a good statement.
And so I realized that so much of spiritual practice, the initial creation of the concept of other, is actually what then schisms people into the whole thing that starts the path and the dark night of the soul and all that kind of stuff. But that if you come back into this wholeness, that's something that Dzogchen talks about a lot, that it's all done. And so he was able to show me that physically, not just in my mind, not just in the world around me, not through beautiful language or teaching. He was able to send through every nervous system receptor in my body what it felt like to move as a single unit instead of 2 bodies. And that's Guru Yoga, right?
Sure. It's just like a breakthrough into this non-dual nature via the martial arts experience, basically.
Via touch. And again, coming back to the Zen tradition, what is the Zen tradition but the nonverbal transmission? We all have that story of the Buddha, just like the guy doesn't speak his language, he shows him the lotus out of the mud, and then boom, there it is. So that's deeply a piece of this thing we call martial arts as well, that the nonverbal transmission of the Dharma through no language. And so I feel that through this living art I'm a part of. It's not anywhere. I've done karate. I've done I mean, there are people who have the living connection to Tai Chi, but I've never had that living connection the same way. And I've done Taekwondo. I've done so many things, boxing. That living connection of like straight up the deepest Dharma transmission through complete nonverbal is a special story to me for Hatsune.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, that is.
And then when I came back to the United States, I was waiting for my paperwork from Japan. And I had this feeling where I just had to go to bed. I had this overwhelming, like, oh, I got to take a nap. I got to take a nap. I go to bed and I have this dream about Hatsune Sensei, and he's showing me jackass videos.
That's funny.
Of a bunch of dudes just like, falling, eating shit, doing all these kinds of things. And then I wake up from the dreams with the dogs barking, and my paperwork was there.
Okay. Interesting. That's interesting. That is funny. That's a little dream yoga there for you.
Exactly. So it all comes together. As long as you're actually doing the practices, as long as you're in that moment, in those places, it all starts to be quite enriching.
Okay. What are also, like, the second part of the question, what are some traits or characteristics you've taken away? Like you mentioned, your teacher in Japan, and then China, and then here there in America. I'm not in America. There in America, Anne Klein, right? What are some traits that you've really perhaps noticed of these teachers, and that you've maybe attempted to integrate or emulate?
So I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because the best way I can answer that is everything I've said tonight. I'm at the point now where ego is. I'm starting to hopefully. I don't want to get ego about ego, but I'm realizing that everything I've said to you tonight is from them, right? And so what am I? And so I think it's really important to start to go through and give proper credence to these people that teach you, that shape you, that give you these ideas. And of course they're bouncing off of, some other, the thing that is actually, the real me, the root, whatever thing. But what I mean to say is that I think when you really start to do true guru yoga about this permeable sense of self that comes through teaching, that comes through contact and darshan and all the other beautiful words for it, the more permeable the sense of self becomes, because you start to realize how much of it is a network, very Indra's net kind of thing, show me the Atman kind of thing. And so, but to get less esoteric about it, my father gave me what I call the wild perspective, the ability to just look at the land, look at the sky, and let the teachings come through. Because as much as I love my other teachers, I've had moments where I've been out in complete nothingness, and the teaching comes like a lightning bolt in the sky that I don't then read about until 20 years later in some Vajrayana text. I'm like, that's what I felt in the backyard peeing on a tree, And I really try to encourage people to that. Like, it's not all going to come from books and teachers. You have to have a wild connection to root reality, because that's where they all got it from too. And so Dad gave me that, the ability to just trust my own mystic perspective and engage the mystery in the real original way, the wild, feral, whatever you want to call it way. Brian was kind of the grit I needed to kind of mature. He was never terribly kind to me, but at the same time he was the first person that was the most, how sometimes you need somebody to just say, yeah, you're a piece of shit, come train,
it's like stern compassion, basically, right?
Yes,
not enabling, not what Chogyam Trungpa used to call that idiot compassion, right? Where it's like you're being a nice person, but however you're just enabling their negative habits and tendencies, right? So
yeah, he was the first person to call it straight, just be like, yeah, you can't fucking do that, kid, get better. And everybody else was, oh, you're a miracle, wonderful boy. Because I had all these I had loving parents. I had a wonderful, loving childhood. Everyone thought I was the best thing on the planet. So to have this mean ninja guy say, get better, was like, yes, this is what I need as an adolescent. He was perfect. So deep bows to Brian. Still to this day, I need to visit him. And so he gave me that. He also helped me pass this test in Japan. He got me over there. He taught me, looking back, we used to beat the shit out of each other in ways that no one ever got hurt. No broken bones, no broken teeth, no even black eyes, but we beat the shit out of each other. And I've learned something from that I can never teach, because I try to teach that to people today and they think I'm insane. So I don't teach it anymore. It's too violent. But it was so deeply enlightening, because we were never hurting each other. It was about cause and effect and the state of mind on reality. So it was wonderful. And so from there, going into to China, all my teachers in China, even my kung fu teachers that were having me move, they taught me stillness and silence. And I needed that desperately. I used to be Sheldon as a little kid, so like that finally was like, oh, information undigested is not useful, and you need silence to digest the information. And so they gave me the silence, they gave me the stillness. And then coming to Anne gave me the love, like the ability to feel that everything is okay, that there's a deeper trust to have in meditation. Something I try to share that Anne gave me is the ability to feel support down to the core of the earth. That even if every bone in your body is broken, every tendon is cut, if you were laying flat as a pile of mush on the ground, the support of gravity in the planet would be uninterrupted. It would still be holding you. And especially having had to relearn to walk so much, that hit a deep chord in my trauma brain of, oh, I can pass out and this planet will hold me. I don't have to hold this posture, because I'm a martial arts guy. Posture this, posture that, hold this, low posture, sweat it out. And if you don't, you're gonna die, you're gonna get hit, you're gonna get cut. So just the ability to say, I can fall off this log and the earth will literally not even vibrate. You know, it's just always continually lifting. That's something I can never give Anne enough. I can never repay her for that. Like, so that's very special to me. And with Simon, he's just the star to follow, you know, just like, oh man, like he's given me so much to read and so much to do. And also when I have these wild meditations that don't fit into anything that's ever happened to me before, I can be like, hey Simon, what's this? And he goes, oh yeah, that's, you know, pre-celestial Jing and these kinds of things. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you. You know, because as much as the Vajrayanas helped my mind so much and my heart so much, when it comes down to if I'm just doing my thing, if I'm doing my spiritual path, my connection, it just happens to be Taoism. Like it's just the things that happen to me in that place end up being something that Taoism's talked about.
Okay, cool. Do you have a daily practice, or I mean, does it change per your circumstances? Like if you're, you know, say for example, you need a pacifying practice, you do a Tara practice, or do you have like a consistent Zazen practice that you do every morning or something like that?
So I do have a lot of prescription practices that are for when you need a certain thing. Yes, that's something I actually try to actively teach. That's the whole Zen part of my Nintozen. No, that's the Nin part of my Nintozen. I like to use it like a tool belt. It's my Batman belt of how to take care of reality kind of thing practices. But my daily practice is lately it's settled into first thing in the morning I do my qigong. Even if it's very minimal, I try to do some type of qigong movement in the morning, standing, because there's also seated qigong. I do standing qigong in the morning. Every after lunch, I do a walking meditation in the forest, because I have the blessing of working in a nature preserve. So I do my normal 9 to 5 job, but every lunch, to make sure I get away from that screen doing something, I do 30-minute walking meditation in the forest.
Nice.
And then after I'm done with that, when I get home from work, I take at least a 20-minute sit to make sure that work doesn't come home with me. And also my wife doesn't get home until a little after I do. And that used to be Zazen, but now has kind of turned into this like Voltron of practices. It's inherently Zazen, but it starts with a little bit of ninefold breathing, Tibetan style stuff where you're using the colors and light, you know, to exhale certain kleshas and those kinds of things, because I just like that. So I've been doing that. I find it very stabilizing. Then after that, I might do a little bit of Vajrasattva on the top of it and do 100-syllable mantra if I feel called to it. So I'll do that Vajrasattva, nectar streams, all that kind of stuff. And then after that, I settle into full Zazen stillness.
Okay.
And from that Zazen stillness, and this is the really cool Taoist thing, the first line of Yang, the first beginning of movement, the big bang of the universe, only occurs from the deepest complete stillness, because it can't become anything else but movement if it's completely and utterly still in a world that is nothing but change.
Mm.
And so there's this really cool thing where sometimes after the prep of, calm the mind with Dzogchen, get into this Zazen place, then the Taoist stuff starts happening on its own from that place of complete stillness. And that's always a surprise because I'd argue certain levels of the Taoist stuff you can't will to happen. They have to come completely spontaneously.
When you say the Taoist stuff, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like a sort of like diverse luminous expression or visions, or what do you mean by Taoist stuff?
It's a little different each time. I'll give you a specific example.
Yeah.
So this latest one, I was, in complete stillness, and I'll give a little bit of intro here that fidgeting to fix your posture is not the same thing as letting your body start to correct itself. So I used to do a lot of things of like, okay, roll my head, get the chin in, get this, that, roll the shoulders, these kinds of things. And that would be like, I would think that was me, like my body settled. But once you really start to like just be completely still, and if the body needs to come up a little bit to take pressure off the back and it does it unbidden from here, that's better stuff. So that stuff starts to kind of happen. And I've recently had one where I was completely in the breath and I'd come up into this place where I realized that I was part of my hip was kind of like out of position because as I was breathing, I noticed there was tension in that section of the orbital of my lung. But again, none of this is like in here. Like it's hard to teach because I'm teaching it from here and using those languages, but it's all experiential nervous system stuff. And I was like, okay, I need to get that fixed. And so it rolls into place and the breath deepens. And then the best way I can describe it, it was as if my entire central column was being jacked off.
Yeah.
It's a twisting, ringing, non-penetrative, non-penetrating, but deeply blissful, almost kind of long burn, orgasmic kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I was not trying to induce that. I was not doing a particular prescribed practice,
Mm-hmm.
none of that. And through that, I just was like, whoa, and I just let that go through. And it was wonderful. And I was like, okay, I got to ask Simon about this. And so I asked him, and anyway, I don't want to give too much stuff like this. This might be edited out stuff because I don't want to go too far. But but anyway, essentially,
yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah. And so he's like, oh, well, that's the actual Jing. That's the watery substance. That's the stuff that comes from the complete pure stillness. And the thing about doing stuff with your mind is the mind is pure fire. And so if you're changing, like you're doing all this kung fu, you're doing all this stuff. I was having all these muscle tears, and then I get scans, and my doctor's like, "There's no muscle tears in there," but it would feel like a muscle tear. And he's like, "If you're only doing qigong with the fire of the mind, you're cooking your internal channels with raw fire, and you're only going to burn them out." I was like, "That's why my dad got a hernia. That's why I've got all these weird burns all in my body and stuff." And he says, "Only when you feel that watery substance of Jing do you let it come up on its own, which sometimes takes years and years and years." And then once that starts to bubble up, the mind is kind of insulated by the water of the Jing. So the mind fire is insulated by the water of this Jing that then can flow through the inner channels and cause them to actually get the medicine. And so I had no idea about this in Taoism, completely no freaking idea, but it's exactly what happened. The watery, blissful substance coming up from the stillness that then my mind moved through to open up different channels in my body. It was happening in real time. Never read the stuff ever. And so that kind of stuff happens to me a lot. I had the whole Indra's net thing occur to me when I was probably like 21 in the backyard, and it just hit me. I nearly passed out in the backyard. And then I didn't start reading Buddhism until 10 years after that. And I was like, that's what happened to me in the backyard. And so that's what I mean by this Taoist stuff. It comes like my dad calls them flashes. Damien Eccles calls them downloads. He's a high magician guy, speaking of the Duncanites. So like that kind of shit happens on its own. And to me, all the other practice comes out of those like downloads, these flashes that just come completely unbidden with no context. And then I have to go find the books and the teachers later to figure out what the heck happened to me.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely relate with that for sure. And
Oh,
there's definitely so in terms of like to bring it to like Tibetan Buddhism, there's Tummo practice where you're using effort to basically bring energy up the central channel and then melt drops down, which induce blissful states, right? Which is effort based, but then you can go back to like Dzogchen, which is without effort, right? Where this kind of naturally occurs. It's sort of the bliss that it's inducing the bliss experience versus resting into the innate bliss where that bliss comes from, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And even in the Dzogchen I'm studying, there are effortful phases where they do the
Sure.
whole effortful thing and all that. But yeah,
Sure.
eventually it does come into this like, okay, womb. This is kind of happening on its own.
Yeah, most definitely. So you mentioned, or I guess I mentioned early in the podcast, that you are also guiding some meditations, or you're offering some. I think you're teaching meditation online as well. Is that correct?
So yeah, I did a retreat with a group called Beyond My Battle, which was a group of people who taught. They were specifically asking for people who had recovered from PTSD, chronic pain, and depression themselves, and were then teaching practices, be that a physician or a yoga instructor or anybody. And that was something that I just couldn't pass up on, given the experiences I'd been through. And so, yeah, I taught that last year. It went really well, got a lot of really good feedback. And I combined not only my physical anthropology that my actual, master's degree, I did a lot of work on stress for that degree. And so I combined a lot of physiological stuff about stress and adaptation, and then combine that with some, Vajrayana-like practices and Taoist practices all together to come up with something that I thought was not being offered to people who have chronic conditions. There's a lot of perfectionism in a lot of spirituality, and and so I wanted to show them that they can still do this and access rest. So I called it radical rest. And that's kind of one of my main things I'm harping on. Every podcast I'm on, I talk about my concepts of rest and how that's kind of what I'm settling into. One of my main things I talk about is the ability to rest that these spiritual practices give in a world that is so restless.
Mm.
And so I taught that, and especially imagine, when you've got chronic pain, rest is almost robbed from you. And if it's not, and if it is given to you, it's commodified through pills or yoga or whatever. And I
Right.
was like, I want to give you people rest back that isn't a commodity. It's your rest forever. So I taught that. And then funny enough, that nonprofit got bought out and absorbed by some other nonprofit, and I haven't heard from them since. But
Oh
that's just
wow.
because, the world and the way that it is right now, everything's changing.
Right.
And now, so I'm just kind of guerrilla teaching meditation. I'm on a lot of discords where I just see people who have questions like I've had before, and I just answer them as thoroughly and as much as I can. And again, I don't really want to help people. I said that at the beginning, and I've regretted it ever since. I think everybody's. I just want to be there with people.
Mm.
I don't, because I think somehow that's what's really needed. Because when you go in trying to help, there's all this stuff about like outcome and scenario and math about like how to do it, and often you can only really know what to do if you're actually with the person, not bringing a prescription. And
Mm.
so I try to be. I just want to be with people. One of my great favorite people is Mr. Rogers. Like I never got to meet him. I never got to receive
Yeah.
receive teachings from Bodhisattva Rogers. But if you listen to his talks outside of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, like him actually speaking,
Mm.
I think he was a fully awakened individual. He's quite special.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I do have fond memories as a child watching Mr. It was such a different program too than
So different.
retrospect when you think of like all the other programs you watch as a kid compared to that. Definitely very
And
interesting.
full circle for me, because I was a Ninja Turtles kid. I wanted to turn Mr. Rogers off as quick as I could and get back to Ninja Turtles. And here I am now, grown up, and I'm like, man, I didn't get it. And now I'm full blown. I'd rather watch him talk all day than Ninja Turtles, as much as I still love my ninja stuff.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So
Yeah.
when you mentioned that you do like guerrilla meditation sessions, do you help people like this is via Zoom, or how are you leading these things?
Discord, Zoom, Teams, any way I can talk to you. Text messages. I have a website that I write stuff on. I wrote one recently called the Thought Artichoke, because I wanted to give people a non-esoteric kind of experience of what it's like when the mind actually quiets, not just, oh, watch the breath, or oh, go stare at the wall, or oh, use a mantra. I wanted to show like, okay, this is the sensations of the levels of the mind quieting down.
Mm, okay, so it's very really focused on helping. Well, I mean, you to use the word
It's
helping,
hard.
sort of.
It's hard,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it's basically reaching out to people that are in chronic pain and allowing them to find rest. Might be a better way to
Yeah.
phrase that. Yeah.
Or just the people that are otherwise disenfranchised. A lot of people on Discord are they're in their teens or in their 20s, or they're in the Bible Belt, or they're the kinds of places they're not going to go to Trudy Goodman and Inside LA. You know what I mean? They're the best they've got is Duncan, or they've got Midnight Gospel or whatever, and they have no idea how to internalize these experiences that happen to everybody. It's not just the druggos, it's not just the weirdies. Like everybody has a mystical experience in reality. And there's no language there. America's really bereft in that right now. And so I just want to show people that they're not alone and help them to figure, again, see, it's hard, so hard not to say that help thing, but like I want to be with them through those experiences. And I want to hear from them, like, what was that really cool trip vision you had, or what was that crazy meditation insight you had? And let's talk about what that means about reality, you know? And often that brings rest. I don't, not even trying to bring about rest, just being there, sharing stories, insight, all that kind of stuff. Next thing you know, they're like, I've never had anybody talk to me the way you just talked to me. And it's like, I was just being myself, you know?
Right.
And I hope that they're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of the people in the world, I mean, look at America, for example, right? It's almost like there's a spiritual sickness, like, or people are yearning for, healing or some sort of spiritual practice or insight because, it's like you go to work, you go home, you watch your Netflix, you got just nonstop political division and this and that. We hate the liberals and these people hate the conservatives and it's your fault. It's all Donald Trump. You're the devil, or in the opposite end, these goddamn liberals are destroying. You know what I mean? And then it's like, where is there any peace of mind in any of this shit, right? And so,
Right.
yeah, and then you do drugs and you might have experiences, but then you come down off of that and now what the fuck do I do here?
Exactly. And
So,
that's where the
yeah,
great completion is so important, you know,
yeah.
because I mean, I work in conservation in Texas, right? So like talk about both sides. You know, I'm dealing with the actual like CEOs of Shell and things like that that are buying up conservation land with their Shell money. So I can't have any us versus them mentality there. You almost have to be a tantrika in order to do conservation in Texas. You know, you can't have that dualistic thinking, or you'll never get anything done. And I think that that's something in America I've always been against, that I have no reason to write anyone else off. I don't care how extreme it gets or whatever reason you got from Tucker Carlson or MSNBC or whatever side you want to call it. There's never a reason to write people completely off.
Yeah.
And so I always talk to people as if we're sitting in the same exact bus, you know. It's so important right now. And as far as that spiritual sickness goes, I think there's an unspoken piece of American history people don't realize, which is that the American dream originally is kind of foundationally extremist. The people that came here originally were extremists, be that for religion, capital, or whatever. And bringing it back to the land, this is an extreme landscape, and it attracts extreme people and changes them in extreme ways. So if you look at a lot of American history, it's I want to make enough money to escape the slavery machine so I can go out into the mountains and go crazy and start a cult. Be
Yeah.
that the Puritans or the hippies or the modern Silicon Valley people and Burning Man, like it's I want to make enough money to escape the slave machine that I myself built, so I can then go crazy in the woods with my bunch of other crazy fun people.
That's a
It's
good way
that
of
is the
looking at it.
true American dream. Like if it
Yeah.
follow the path of celestial seasonings, you know, Sleepy Time Bear. That's actually also a cult, by the way, and they use the Sleepy Time Bear money tea to fund their crazy acid cult in the mountains. Like that's so much of American history. Dr. Bronner's, so much of American history is that. And so because of that, this idea that America is this like not religious thing is deeply ignorant, that we've been extremist and we have been deeply individuated for a long, long time. And because of that, we don't get wisdom,
Mm,
because wisdom takes a long time to digest. And so that's what split the church, to where this church became an institution of the state.
mm,
And then the mysticism became completely so wild that it has no wisdom connected to it. I mean, the mystic experience. So I
sure.
bring the martial arts into that, that I've met so many people with their intuitions awakening that still get hit in the face, right? But they're supposed to be these amazing, intuitive kind of individuals.
Right.
And so while I love the resurgence of mystical experience in America, I think the main irresponsible piece there is they don't realize how much intuition used to be trained by
Mm,
reality before the comforts we have now, and also by teachers, like the teachers I've experienced, that they used to be, you know, more prolific in the time. And I think that
sure.
that training, the training of intuition, is why so much of the stuff going on right now is not connecting people, but causing them to split off further and further. Because so long as you don't train that intuition, you're going to keep bloodying each other's noses by accident.
Mm, yeah,
So
that's a good point. I also think that in America, from a quote unquote Western perspective, there's almost a, what would you say, like a deeply ingrained doubt against taking on a guru or a teacher, right? So like in the East, it's sort of normal. Like it's assumed that I need a teacher to help me, stabilize these insights, help me with practices, help me with questions I have, right? Whereas in America, I feel like a lot of people have the idea like, I can just do this all on my own. Whereas like none of these traditions say like you can figure this out all on your own,
Also, unless it's Gordon Gekko,
Mm,
right? Or unless it's Gordon Ramsay, or unless it's RuPaul, or unless we have Guru Yoga here. It's materialistic Guru Yoga.
right,
And
right,
so like we are allowed to get that mentor, to get that person who trains you in how to eat, how to sleep, how to think, how to work, but it's all only if it brings you material stability.
right,
That's
right.
it. That's it. Anything that doesn't bring you that is not allowed. And that's part of this whole thing, because again, if you look at the ruling class, they're doing nothing but this crazy esoteric stuff. And so it's part of the whole construction of the American machine to be like, don't let yourself do that. And so yeah, so a big influencer in mine, I'm glad I'm going to bring him up to, is Vine Deloria Jr. He was my dad's best friend and one of the most critical writers in the Native American voice in American history. He's an amazing writer. He so there's all these American climbers. Do you know what Devil's Tower is? It's really wild landscape feature. A lot of people think it's an old petrified tree, but it's essentially, it looks like it's a big mesa in the middle of a place that doesn't have mesas. So it looks kind of like a big flat trunk tree, and people love to climb it, but of course it's a sacred Native American site. And so there was this fight where all these people were like, we should be able to climb this thing, but the Native Americans had closed it down because like this period of the year, this sacred place needs to recharge. It needs to be itself, not for you, not for anything else. This sacred place needs to be itself. And all the people were like, well, we should be able to climb it because climbing mountains is my sacred connection. I have my transcendent experiences climbing, and it's my church, and I'm connecting to nature. And don't you Native Americans love nature? And this is my nature church, and I should be able to do this. Meh. And all Vine said to this person was, who are you being mystical for?
Mm,
Not for the land, clearly. Are
mm,
you doing this to enrich this place? No, you're here to take from this place. Are
mm.
you here to enrich your community? No, you're here to have your experience with your divinity. That's it. So if you look at these teachers, even not in Native American traditions and also around the world, the mysticism was pragmatic and the mysticism was in context. It was to liberate suffering. It was to bring new forms of medicine to people. Because if you've got this mystic out there and he's been watching the huts of the village for the last, 30 years, and you come up to him and you're like, what? Why is our village so sick? He says, well, while you guys were having your lives, I was watching all these beetles come down the mountain and they've been shitting in the water and they've been making all the water really dirty. And that's why you guys are all sick right now. They go, oh my God, you're so mystical. I need to figure out how you did that. And he goes, well, I'm just watching out for y'all.
Yeah.
And maybe he was autistic or whatever, and he didn't want to be around people. But so he got that outside perspective. But even the farthest out mystics, they're doing it for the land, the cosmos, other sentient beings,
Right.
community, and connection. And
Right.
so much of the American thing, to bring it back what I said earlier, is I'm going to use the mysticism to get superpowers and get out and help
Mm,
myself.
that's a good point. A lot of it is it's the inverse of what we would call like bodhicitta or the bodhisattva path, right? Which is inherently like for the sake of all sentient beings, for the sake of I will achieve this for the sake of others, right? For the sake of
Hmm.
reality, right? Whereas it's like, yeah, like you're saying, it's almost the inverse in some of the Western approaches. It's like, I'm going to do this practice so I get power so I can, it's a glorification or it's like it's like spiritual materialism, right? It's sort of
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
this so I can be the one to get my shit or whatever, right? And so, yeah, I think that's
Yes.
definitely very important to call out because it is ego glorification in the guise of esoteric or spiritual
Hmm.
mysticism, right? So it's
Yeah, and coming back to motive, like I teach a lot of, and that's why I like to work with these people on the DTFH and people who aren't like necessarily empowered individuals, because the people who get this stuff in a position of disempowerment or oppression, often they'll have this subconscious thing about superpowers, be that through martial arts or meditation. I don't mean superpowers. I mean they want to catch things they couldn't catch before. They want to, they want to be able to see further. They want to be able to do the cool like psychic, go find somebody somewhere. They want to unlock some higher state of being, higher altered state. And you ask them why they want to do that, and eventually they'll have all these things that they've heard from other people, they'll say, right? Or they'll have some kind of thing. But if you take it down to its root, it's they somehow feel that they're not worthy of something.
Right, right, right.
That's why they need to have this superpower. Even if they're not worthy of their own humanity, they think, oh, I can't be a human unless I can run fast. I can't be a human unless I can, fight in the ring, or all these kinds of things. There's some sense of unworthiness that the superpower desire is connected to. And I think
Yeah,
that's why Americans are so obsessed with superheroes right now. They have to get the hammer of Thor. They got to be worthy. And you are already worthy.
right.
And that American sickness is we're never worth enough because everything's a commodity. And that's why everybody wants superpowers, because then they can be worth more than commodity. They're worth that special knack, that special thing, that thing that is not my power. And that wraps up in our whole spiritual quest. Which is kind
Yeah,
of funny because in the Native American stuff, they had some really wild stuff they could actually do.
right, right, right. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Yeah, I like what you said there. It reminded me of a quote here. I want to read this really quick. You really reminded me of something I read yesterday. It's pretty short, so I'll share it really quick. The question that all occultists must ask themselves is this: why am I even doing this? What is the ultimate goal here? Is it meandering in the astral wasteland serving any true function? Is all the study and calling forth of dubious spirits serving any profound purpose here? Could I be deluding myself with fantasies from my imagination? Could my pile of books be misleading me? Am I merely fishing for cool experiences like taking a drug? Am I just trying to manipulate the elements of my universe to maximize my personal benefit? Is this a cultural fashion statement? Am I after personal powers? Do I really just want to belong to a community? What am I really after here? Be very careful of who you listen to, what advice you follow, and always ask why. No esoteric authority or system circumvents that question. If the answer is not clear from the outset, chances are that your sources might be somewhat confused and diluted too. The care you spend on this issue can save you years of useless toil and can redeem your life. I'm talking to you and I'm talking to me. This is the central question for all of us, my friends.
All right.
I thought that was good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's how we get to will. So, I mean, I'm going to have to go soon because it's getting late over here. But to kind of put a bow on it is that I want to be here to take the load off. For me, for you, for the planet, everything is too fast, too much all the time. And it literally does not have to be that way. And so all the ninjutsu, all the meditation, all the Taoism, I mean, I play music too. Everything I do is to take the load off. Ever since I was a little kid, because I was raised by performers, I wanted to do what we were going to do when the curtain fell. I wanted to put all the costumes away, put the guitars away. I wanted to know what we were going to do when it was all when the curtain was down. And that's kind of that kind of stuck with me. I want to help people put the stuff down, put the curtain down, and rest. And the funny thing is, once you let them rest, they end up doing the things they have to do anyway, like paint and dance and sing and write and do cool math and who knows what. But at least somebody needs to be out there reminding people, to how to actually, take a load off. And the planet needs it desperately, desperately.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to wrap it up. And yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been a very good conversation. Maybe again in the future we can hop on another chat. But for now, since we're ending here today, how can people, maybe somebody listens to this podcast, they want to reach out to you, or maybe even join one of your like guided meditation sessions? How can people find you, reach out to you?
So I'm pretty much everywhere nowadays on Nintozen, so Nintozen, Nintozen.com, Nintozen at Twitter, Nintozen at Instagram, and you can reach me through most of those platforms. I don't have any, like my DMs are still open. I'm not terribly famous, so I can leave those wide open. I've probably got I think 200, I think I've maybe got like 100 followers on Twitter at this point. They're mostly writing blogs. So yeah, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. And my website's the best place because you can see my writing, and I have an email set up through there. Is a great way to find me. And as far as joining meditations, I'm still working on a schedule. I'm kind of at a kind of book as available. I have a Venmo set up, those kinds of things, so we can talk about it and get some scheduling. I'm trying to get a weekly one going again, but my schedule just changed at work. So check me out, Nintozen, and all the places you can find that.
All right, cool. I'll include all those links in the show notes. And thanks a lot again. And until next time.
Yeah, I'd love to come. We didn't really get to talk about the Native American stuff very much because I'd love to also talk about how that blends with the Taoism because it's very interesting because they're so normally not talked about together. America's like the only place that's ever happened. So I think that's a fun topic since you said you hadn't had too much of that in the show. So
yeah, maybe we could do a whole episode focused on that specifically. That'd be really cool. I'd really enjoy that.
It'd be very fun.
Definitely,
All
definitely.
right. Well, thank
Right.
you so much. This is only my third podcast ever, so I feel deeply indebted to you, and I've loved talking with you on the DTFH and
Oh,
all
for
that. So
sure.
thanks so much for
Oh,
doing this. And I love your work too. I've seen at least a number of your episodes. So
thanks so much. Yeah. All right, cool.
yeah, man.